Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Ghana, Stitcher Radio, Himalaya, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Dr. Joseph Garcia. He is known as the grandfather of baby sign language. He's going to tell us how we can help kids learn how to read with sign language. Before we invite Dr. Joseph into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by I Told You So, a great series of books for young readers by our friend Mark Gunning. I Told You So follows the wild adventures of William and Thomas, two dear lifelong friends, as they get into a little bit of mischief, celebrate friendship, and learn some valuable lessons. Mark Gunning has been an elementary school teacher since 1996, spending most of his time in the junior grades with elementary school kids. And he decided that it was time for him to start to write books that will reach reluctant readers with his unique style of storytelling. The I Told You So series is a perfect choice for the family library of anybody that has a reluctant reader in the house. And it's a great series of books that you're going to love reading with your kids. Check it out today. It's available on Amazon, the I Told You So series by Mark Gunning. Join us right now from Bellingham in Washington, the uppermost left corner of the continental United States. This is going to be a fascinating conversation, I believe. Our guest today started early life as a musher in Alaska. And now he is a doctor who is known as the grandfather of baby sign language. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Joseph Garcia. Hey, Dr. Joseph, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you for having me on your program. I appreciate it.
I just got to go there right off the bat. A musher in Alaska. Well, I know what it is, but some people out there might be thinking he makes mashed potatoes. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, I happen to have a Alaskan Malamute and gave birth to a team of Alaskan Malamutes, and I raised them up as puppies, made some harnesses for them, built a couple dog sleds, and used to run around, with my team. They used to love to run, and it was a fun, experience for them. And I moved up to Alaska to work for the University of Alaska and took my team with me up there. And next thing I know is I was in the middle of the musher world. They call mushers people who run dog sled teams. But my team was sort of like an old pickup truck versus all the sleek Ferraris, dog teams they have up there. I wasn't into racing. I was just into being back in the wilderness, running my team and having them have a good experiences along with me. So, and also keeping exercise. I tell you, most people see the pictures of people riding a dog sled. I work up a sweat every time, even at 40 below zero when I'm out there mushing. You're pushing, running, kicking, scooting, doing all kinds of running back and forth and all kinds of work to keep that dog team going. So, it's rare that you sit there on the stanchions, the foot rails, and just ride a dog team.
Yeah.
Very rare.
Yeah. I've seen some competitions and some videos of competitions, and yeah, it does. It looks very rigorous, and it looks very cold, and so I think I'll experience it from afar. So, how did you become known as the grandfather of baby sign language?
Well, I'll tell you the whole story in a quick nutshell. I went to a parochial school when I was very young. We had all kinds of special needs kids there because it was the only way in the 50s you could have an education if you had a special needs kid was to go to a parochial school. So I would sit in the back of the room where they would put all of the special needs kids, and because I was the only person of color in the entire school, they would put me in the back with the deaf and blind and other kids. So I was exposed to sign language very early and didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just part of life. Some people sign, some people talk, no big deal. So as I grew up, I realized that was a big deal. People who are deaf didn't have a lot of representation and other issues. So I had some deaf friends. I learned sign language from them. I never really took any formal classes. I just joined the deaf community and learned sign from deaf people. Well, what I found out was that very few people do that. And as a result, I became an interpreter out of necessity with a lot of my friends who needed interpreting services. And as I grew up and started having a family, I noticed that deaf people were signing with their children, and the children were signing back almost a year or more earlier than hearing children were articulating their first words. And I thought, well, why don't we do that as hearing people? And of course, we see sign language as a society as a disability rather than one of an ability. So there's a lot of prejudice or I don't know, bigotry, whatever word you want to use, against disabled people, unfortunately, in the world. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there was that barrier. So I decided to sign with my very young children, and I had my children talking. They had about 80, 90 signs before they were 15 months old. And they were communicating all kinds of things to me, where they hurt, if they saw a bee, be careful of that sharp knife, all kinds of things. I'm going, my gosh, why doesn't everybody do this? But they wouldn't accept it unless a formal clinical study was done. So I did a study at the university that I was at the time, and I was done. Rather than publish the findings and get in the academic circle, I just decided to write a book about it to help other parents guide through the process of learning to sign with their kids. And we found out over time that not only was it a valuable enabling tool for kids to help them discover their ability to express themselves and control their environment, which is an amazing cultural imprint to put on a child that young, to have them learn that they can, through their own internal resources, make the outside environment kind of congeal with what they want or what they need. It's remarkable. So I did that, wrote the little book. I didn't think much of it. It was a small little pamphlet. Well, that pamphlet sold thousands of copies all over the country. And so because it was the first one published out there, since then there's been a dozen or so, of course, that have followed up. But because I was the first one, I guess they called me the grandfather of baby sign language, because I did some of the first research and did the first book. And since then, Linda Credlow, Susan Goodwin at the university at UC Davis got a Department of Health grant to do a study on that too, and they did a program where they just used made up signs, whereas I stayed with the ASL program because I wanted to honor the deaf who gave us this wonderful gift, mm-hmm. and I used the ASL signs so that they also could have a resource to gain more signs and learn more things. Anyway, that's kind of the story. Once I did that and let the cat out of the bag, the rest is history. Now it's all over the world.
Well, I'm certainly happy. I'm really happy that you made the choice to release your discovery to the world and not exclusively to the academic world, because I think it got out there a lot quicker and wasn't put on a shelf somewhere. Sometimes research gets put and it gets lost. What happened?
Right. In fact, the president of the University of Alaska, when I finished my research, he asked me, he says, well, Joseph, are you going to write a paper and have it put on a shelf, or are you going to do something about this? And I said, what a great question to ask me. You're right. Forget the academic. I'm not trying to prove myself and gain tenure and all that kind of stuff and go on and join that ivory tower group. Not that I'm against that. We need rigorous people doing studies, publishing the studies and all that, but to take the published study or to take the information and put it in a applicable format that people can use and improve their lives, I think that is where the real true contribution to society comes from, is making research applicable.
Yeah. And, I'm not sure, and she's not here to kind of defend herself, but I really love the idea that you stayed true to the ASL signs. Because it just makes sense to me. We have this language. We talk a lot about the benefits of kids becoming dual language learners, to be bilingual or trilingual. Why not help kids be, from a very early age, fluent and sign language so that they can communicate with this great community of people in the deaf world. There are beautiful friends out there waiting to be made.
Okay, 2 points. Number one, when Credlow and Goodwin did their research, they were just trying to define if children have the cognitive ability to send and receive communicative elements. The signs were not that critical in their research, so that's why they just chose homemade signs. So there's no negativity to that research at all. The issue is that because I came from the deaf community, kind of already knew, I saw it firsthand, so I had anecdotal evidence that this was a real capacity building process in a child. But because I was in the deaf community, just happened to use ASL, which kind of caught on. And since then, Cradle and Goodwin have adjusted over to ASL too. So we're all on the same page. We're all trying to advance the human condition, of course. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah. And I love the heart, where your heart is coming from. Just this idea of, I have something, I want to share it so that we can make the world a better place, so that we can grow closer together as a human family.
Yes, that's the whole point of being alive on the earth. People always say, why are we here? Well, we're here to help each other, to build. Bigger is not better, those kind of things. The idea is that we're using up more resources on the earth than we have. There's a bunch of issues that we're faced with right now that, we need to contribute to solutions and not add to problems. Mm-hmm. And so helping your child learn to read, for example, with my finger spelling program, there's nothing better than to sit down with your child or have the child sit there and watch them discover their capabilities and their resources. It's just remarkable. In fact, when my son looked up at me and was able to fingerspell his name, something he'd been saying or hearing all this time, and he could finally see it represented on his little fingers, it brought tears to my eyes.
I'm sure. That's so wonderful. So if we turn back the clock 30 years and my son is just coming into the world, and my wife actually is not fluent but very knowledgeable in ASL. Her goddaughter is deaf, and so they developed a beautiful relationship and communicate a lot through ASL. What could we have done with my son to introduce him to sign from whatever age?
Well, first of all, you don't need to be fluent in ASL. In fact, what I offer, children speak in one-word sentences anyway. Mm-hmm. If they, let's say that they see a bird land on the windowsill and it eats something and they get scared away by a squirrel or something, what they're going to do is sign the word bird, because they can make the sign bird, and that sign represents that entire experience. So when the children are an empty void ready to be filled with language, all different, whether it be sign or words, it doesn't matter. The point is they want to communicate with the world. So if you don't have to be fluent with signs. What I offer is a few basic signs for each event throughout the day, so that by the time you're done, you got all these different signs that they can see what's coming, what's happening, and you can learn them just as you do things. So, in fact, my new program that's called 14 Days to Baby Sign Language, or I think it's Baby Sign Language in 14 Days, one of those. Anyway, each day you learn a new event. By the end of the 14 days, you have 80 signs, and you don't have to study anything. You just look on your device. It shows the signs for changing diapers, signs for taking a bath, signs for, the different events you do. So you slowly accumulate the language, the signs, and those are signs your child needs to either use or wants to use, or signs that you want to express to your child to let them know what's coming next, or that type of thing. So fluidity is not important. And you can start newborn baby when they get to be about 4 months old. They can focus on something more than 2 or 3 feet away. As a result, that's the optimum time to start modeling signs for your baby. Again, modeling signs. You never teach signs to a baby. You never want to put expectations on a child or look like you're force-feeding signs to somebody, or sign or you don't get the milk. You never want to make signing a condition of service or care. But you just model the signs in your normal everyday activities. When you nurse, you sign milk. When you are getting ready to take a bath, you sign, let's take a bath, and you to take a bath. Just narrate your life and add those key signs in during different events. Let the baby observe. You want them to observe, process in their mind and then associate those gestures with that activity, object, or whatever's taking place. And over time, they will develop the connection between those two. And when they start to express it, we have children who start one or two signs here and there, some who don't sign at all of a sudden, boom, they explode to the whole bunch. Everybody's a little bit different in those first 3 years of life. But the important thing is, by having that skill, it allows them, again, to navigate through their life rather than just riding that, I use this a lot, the roller coaster of life, not knowing what comes next or just having these sudden turns and jerks. When they communicate, it changes the way that they perceive the world and the way that they approach learning, approach doing a lot of things. I've had a lot of parents tell us, well, I didn't sign with my first one, but I did with my second one. And the child I sign with tends to be a little more motivated to go after things. And I think that is we don't have clinical proof yet, but anecdotally, we think that by empowering a young child to communicate and sort of affect their environment, we also teach them the fact that they can go forward and affect their environment through using internal resources. And I think that is more important than the cute little, oh, my baby can sign. I hear that all the time. And that's great. But the more important aspect is that your child is developing a cultural imprint of empowering itself through communication and through activity to affect their environment. And that's the key. Also, moms and dads, when they have a tool that gives them an instantaneous feedback mechanism to show them that they are doing the right thing. For example, we had a doctor who, mama brought in a baby and said, my child has an ear infection or something. Doctor says, well, how do you know? He says, well, my baby told me. Doctor says, your baby told me? What do you mean? He's only 9 months old. How did he tell you? Well, he signed earache at his ear, pain at his ear. So the doctor looked, and sure enough, there was an infection in the ear. Well, that doctor ordered a whole stack of books from me and gave one to every new mom who came into the office. He said that was the best time he ever had trying to figure out what's wrong with the kid, when he can just tell you, hey, I got a stomach ache. Hey, I hit my knee. I bumped my head, whatever. Just that alone, or the don't touch. You can warn a child not to touch something from a distance. That being shown a rough surface like sandpaper or warm mashed potatoes, and then you touch it and go, oh my gosh, that's hot or that's rough. Don't touch that. And then later on, when you have a hot steam pipe or something, then you know that that's not the thing to touch.
That makes perfect sense. I so wish that my son would have been able to sign with me. There was one day in particular, we're up in Bar Harbor, Maine, and he was just miserable, and we had no idea what was wrong.
Yeah, well, that's only one example. There's so many. I mean, being at the nucleus of this whole movement for the last 25, 30 years or so, I've gotten emails from moms and dads from all over the world actually telling me these incredible stories of how their babies communicate with them and create signs to express themselves sometime after a while, once they realize that they can, use signs and express themselves before they can talk. And we've had, as you can see by my website, I even had conversations with chimpanzees in sign language. And of course, children have so much more capacity than our chimps, and they learned about 200 signs before, and they never did learn to talk, but they had about 200 and some signs. So my grandson has about 65 signs now, and he's just a very young child. I think he's 9, 10 months now. So he just signs up a storm because everybody around him is doing little signs all the time to show him things. Yeah. In fact, you'll see him on my website signing a bunch of stuff.
Wow. You mentioned that a pediatrician who, the baby told him I have an earache, and sure enough, the baby had an ear infection. Went out and purchased pamphlets for all of his newborn moms with newborn babies. You just did something very similar. You created a project to get this information out to indigenous folks here in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my whole idea was that a lot of new information and research and the results of research is released, and of course those in the position to purchase those things get it first, and it trickles down. So I thought it'd be a great idea because I have a brand new concept. It's kind of like baby sign language kind of was a new innovative way to think about communication. Well, I was looking at the process of learning to read and how much expectation and stress is put on children in some cases to learn how to read. Or it's an arduous process for some kids too. So I thought, well, what would be a fun way, a game-like way to help people learn to read, young children learn to read? And I noticed that deaf children also love to sit and play with their fingers and do finger spelling. When they saw parents finger spelling, they'd try to do it too when they were very, very young. So I looked at that and I thought, let's do a little study on that. So I did, and I found out that young children 4, 5, and 6 years old, when they're in preschool, they love to do things like play with their fingers. So I came up with a finger spelling book that there's no A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, there's no words spelt like that. Mm-hmm. What it does is it starts out with 2-letter words, or first some single letters just to play with the shapes with your fingers, then 2-letter words and 3-letter words and 4, and it works up to 5-letter words in the book. And then there's a poem that you go through in the book, and each poem has 1 or 2 words you have to finger spell. And children sit with that book. The artwork is phenomenal. We had this woman who's just, she's an amazing poet and artist, and she did these incredible illustrations that children are just drawn to. And it goes through 5 days of the week with all these creatures and characters, and they all have real big hands, and they have finger shapes. And the children just sit there, and they go through the book, and they practice these things. And like I said, to see my son, or my grandson actually, finger spell his name for the first time and know that what he was saying he could make on his hands was great. In fact, a kindergarten teacher in one of the study groups that we put the book out to said, "You won't believe this. At recess, our kids go out on the playground, they sit across from each other and finger spell words the whole time." And we're going, wow, that's when they want to do that rather than play around on the playground. I'd rather them get exercise, of course, but it just shows how compelling that game-like activity is for children to be able to learn how to spell and not even know they're learning how to spell. They're just having fun, having a game-like thing happen. Next thing you know, by the way, the practice words in the back of the book are competency words for 1st and 2nd grade. So by the time these kids are in preschool or kindergarten, they already know how to spell competency words for 1st and 2nd grade and don't even know that they've done that. You know, it's the perfect way to learn when you're having fun, playing, having a good time. And if you sit in the car for a long time or plane or train or any place like that, and nothing better than to open that finger spelling book and go through it and play with your hand shapes. So, and there's nothing better also than having a parent sit down and go through it with your child and have a good time going back and forth with your hand shapes and her hand shapes. So I think hopefully this is going to revolutionize. But yeah, well, what we did was I partnered up with the Northwest Indian College in Washington, and they provided the postage and I provided the books, and we sent a free fingerspelling book to every early learning program at every tribe in the nation, just to give them that first look at this new innovative practice of helping children learn to read. And again, I like to start where it's needed the most and then go up from there.
Yeah, what a great gift that you gave, not only to the folks in those tribes, but to our whole nation and our world. I think, when we come together, lift each other up, it's a beautiful thing for everyone. I
agree.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And the name of that.
By the way, I must give credit to the Port of Bellingham because I'm poor. They gave me a small grant to be able to print up the 600 books that I had to send out to every tribe. I couldn't afford to do it myself, but they gave me a small grant to do that. And like I said, the Northwest Indian College provided the postage for all of that, which was really wonderful.
Well, things work best when we work as teams and come together. So that's beautiful. And the name of that book is Dr. Joseph's Fingerspelling Book, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What's next for Dr. Joseph?
Well, right now no one knows about Dr. Joseph's fingerspelling book until they listen to your podcast. And very few people know about my new 14-day to baby sign language program. So I am right now, in fact, I'm trying to borrow some money from SBA to try to get the message out to people so they can understand this stuff is available. We're trying to price stuff at almost negligible cost just so that everybody can afford it. Again, money is a tool, not a goal. I want to make this affordable so every family can have it and every family can use it to improve their life conditions. So, if people want to purchase this stuff, by all means, thank you. I will try to use those resources to go further into, not so much into newer products, but make sure that the ones we already have are going to be used around the country and the world. I think that's right there is going to be a pretty good task. And also, I work in Indian country a lot. I try to write a lot of grants to help indigenous communities, the college here, the Northwest Indian College, and other programs. Setting Sun Productions, which is an Indian group. I try to help them as much as I can. Again, the whole idea is serving the community replenishes my soul and makes me strong.
Well, we want people to know where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about your books.
drjosephgarcia.com. drjosephgarcia.com is the place.
Awesome. We've had...
Well, if you type in 14 days to baby sign language or my fingerspelling, Dr. Joseph, it'll probably get you back to my site too. Oh, one other thing that we had one teacher in Covina, California, who has all of her kindergarten students fingerspell their name as they come into the classroom. And I thought that was really cute.
That is cute. What a great idea. What a great idea. Any teachers, we have lots of teachers who listen to the show. What a great thing to introduce to your class. Obviously, it was meant for real young kids, but I'm imagining this would be a lot of fun for kids in first, second, third grade to start doing and playing and having fun with.
Yes, because, especially with the TION, SION, you're adding muscle memory to the cognitive process of trying to remember these Greek, Latin, and French and all the other, sort of contributors to the English language with all their different rules and silent letters and so forth and so on. So by having fingerspelling, that muscle memory, it helps a lot of children who are not necessarily cognitive learners, but visual learners and tactile learners to have that extra supplemental learning strategy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Dr. Joseph, we have to have you back on at some point because this is fascinating. I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about. I think there's a lot of ways that we can, as a nation, as a human family, can make learning more fun and more effective and more accessible to more and more kids.
I agree, yes.
Yeah.
Especially when over 57% of learners are tactile and visual learners. We can't expect people to sit in a chair and just memorize things all the time.
Absolutely. We've had a great time speaking with the grandfather of baby sign language, Dr. Joseph Garcia. Hey, Dr. Joseph, thanks for being with us.
Okay, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Shannon Anderson, one of our favorite teachers and one of our favorite authors. She'll be joining us to celebrate I Love Strawberries. She also has a lot of really fun advice and insight for aspiring authors. Hey, we would love it if you could connect with us on social media. So many different places to do it. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. You can also always visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button at the top of the page to give us a message. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Dr. Joseph Garcia. Check out his really groundbreaking research into helping kids learn how to read and communicate with sign language. We also want to thank our sponsor, I Told You So, the great series for reluctant readers, for any readers, but it's especially fun for reluctant readers by our friend Mark Gunning. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.